Hello and welcome to this episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. And today I have Mosh Druion. Mosh, I just want to, thank you for taking the time to come onto the podcast today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me.
No problem. So looking at your LinkedIn, you used to work at DateNight.ai. What did you do at DateNight? Actually,
So,
before that question, what is DateNight.ai? And then what did you do there?
so DateNight.ai is an online dating platform started by a friend of mine. He's from Manhattan originally. Um, he got married. He lives in Tel Aviv. I still live in Tel Aviv. It basically started from during Corona. He started with a bunch of friends a Facebook dating group called Corona Crush. It got to around 23,000 people, I think. A couple of people got married. There were lots of people are still dating. Um, and he decided to turn it into an online dating platform that is basically speed dating, but online. So he's in the very early stages of the company. He's raised some angel investment, and he's got a couple of organizations around the world that are using this dating platform for people that are members of the organization. Um, it's very early stage. I was just doing an internship in full stack development there, um, and yeah, that's basically that's DateNight AI.
Okay, and like, are you obviously you're doing full stack? Like, what specific things did you work on per se? Because I had a quick look at the website. It's not, a dating website like Tinder, for example.
Yeah.
So it is different. So I'm just wondering, what you worked on per se on the website.
So the pretty much the whole website was built by the founder Ian. But here and there he would. I was just post a boot camp, so here and there he would give me different tasks to kind of, for my own practice, just to stay up to scratch. Let's say to build kind of a database system or to um, maybe a little bit of front end development. But I didn't build that specific site. That was built by Ian, who is a
Okay,
self
so
taught developer.
self-taught developer. Okay. And just talking about Ian a second, like what did he do prior to that? Because he's a self-taught developer. So what was his background before making the website?
So he started teaching himself. I think he's around 33 now. He started teaching himself to um, software development. I think when he was maybe 15, 16. Um, and he was kind of a chess prodigy in New York, and he worked in New York. He studied finance at Michigan, and he worked as a trader in New York, an equity trader for a couple of years, I think 3 years. And when he moved to Israel, he worked in VC, and I think he started to automate a lot of the tasks at his job. And I think from there he moved into business intelligence. He moved into um, business intelligence kind of. I think he was maybe doing a bit of regular development also. And then post that, he joined a cybersecurity startup called SegaSec, and he was doing, I think, business development and sales there. And they had they had quite a quick exit. I think it was around $40 million, but within 2 years or something like that.
Okay.
And then during the Corona period, which was around 2 years, he started this Facebook dating group. And I'm not sure exactly what he was doing during that time in terms of other work, but I think he was kind of maybe involved in a the tech ecosystem in Israel. Everyone's always helping everyone in terms of meeting founders. Maybe you're working on a side project here, a side project there. Especially happened during Corona, and then I think once he saw that this Facebook dating group was really successful, that's when he started Date Night. And he's, they've already had revenue and things like that. But I think he, I think he basically just taught himself to use Python when he was 15, 16, and then from then just kind of used it, at work just to be more efficient with everything, to automate as many things as possible, and that changed into business intelligence. And from there, he kind of just moved around the startup world, you could say.
Okay.
But kind of in Israel in general, in especially in Tel Aviv, there's a lot of people that even if they're not working as developers, if they're working in sales or biz dev or even VC, there's lots of people that either studied software development, through university, or they did it something in the army, or they came from overseas. So it's very there's a very heavy focus on very strong technical skills here, um, which is a little bit different, at least from what I know. At least in South Africa, there's a lot of people that in South Africa, kind of generally the people that are studying software engineering, it's people that only want to work as software engineers, whereas here it's most people study it, and there's obviously a large percentage that become software engineers and data scientists and whatnot. But there's also a lot of people that the auxiliary parts of the tech industry, business development, sales, content writing, all that sort of thing. There's a lot of people that have a very strong background in either studying it or having done it in the army or self-taught. Just so Ian's one of those people. He's self-taught.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, what do you think it is about Israel that has a high sort of preference and you know lean towards software engineering development? Because I have heard that they are very cutting edge in terms of their programmers and especially cybersecurity. So what is it about over there that's really made that happen compared to other countries, like you said?
I think it's probably a few things. I don't even know if I'd be able to name all of them, but I would guess maybe look for a long time, especially the history of Israel in general. Just that people came here, I don't know, many years ago, and there wasn't really much here. It's not like there's lots of very fertile farming land, and I come from South Africa, so South Africa there's diamonds and copper and gold, and other countries there's oil. There wasn't really anything here specifically for people to, I guess, survive with. So I think the culture in general from a long time ago was innovation out of necessity. And then also, you had a lot of people coming here from, Eastern Europe, and people maybe had scientific backgrounds. I know specifically in, let's say, around, 1990, 1991, a lot of people came here from Russia. And they were all scientists and engineers and software engineers, and there was a very strong uh, immigration to Israel of a STEM influence, let's say from countries like Russia and Ukraine, that sort of thing. And then also, I think there's a very strong focus on academics here, um, and so I think that, and then I think also a lot of people here, post like the army and stuff, because they've, by the time they're 21, 22, they've kind of been through this army experience and I guess got a bit mature, hopefully. And they've traveled, a lot of people go traveling in South America and India. They kind of, by the time they actually start studying, let's say they're 23, 24, it's different. My friends in South Africa started studying when they were 18, and it may be the really smart people when they were 16, 17, but 18, 19, and I'm not sure, I'm not saying people don't really know, but I'm not sure people always know exactly what they want to do. Whereas here, I think people by the time they're 23, 24, 25, there's a lot of people that only start studying when they're 26, 27. I was interning at a startup post the boot camp now, where the co-founder's brother-in-law was interning there, and he was 7 years in the army. So he only started to study computer science. Um, he's doing computer science and entrepreneurship when he was 25. So I think when you go and study when you're kind of a bit older, I think you take it a bit more seriously, and I think you probably a lot more. You're a lot more. There's a lot more intention behind your studying. You really want it, and I think also Israel economically is. I mean, I think the country's kind of doing well, but it's funny because I come from an economics background, but um, it's quite tough here compared to if I compare at least to South Africa, or I've got a lot of friends from America and London. Um, People have it's quite tough here if I'm comparing to Western countries. So you know people really have to work hard to make it. So you really have to push yourself. There's not really any space to take it easy, if I would say. So because of all those factors, um, I think it just combines in that people are kind of out of necessity just have to make it, you know. And I think Israel as a whole, I worked in economic consulting with a lot of companies, and kind of the standard business model was that R&D was in Israel, and sales and business is very, directed towards America. And I think it's just out of necessity is that, these companies have to make it, and so I think maybe the word is just necessity. I mean, I think there's a bit of innovation just in general. I think Jewish people in general are, you know, very business driven, but I think here it's very, in general in Israel, I think it's very out of necessity that I think the innovation, I think it's driven out of necessity,
Yeah,
I think.
fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I do like that old saying of necessity is the mother of all invention, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's so true. When you have to, or you're backed into a corner, you either cower and don't do anything, and you lose, or you innovate and you invent it in a way that you couldn't even have imagined doing it before. So yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Obviously, if you're in that situation, you're more likely to. So you mentioned that you worked as an economist for a bunch of other companies. Before
yeah,
we talk about that, you did something different at university because you did full stack development programming at
yeah,
DateNight.ai. You
yeah,
went to university, but you studied a different degree. So like, how
yeah.
did like all of that occur? Like, what did you do at uni, and how did that transition occur, and why did it occur?
So when I went to study, I was finishing up in Israel. Um, I went to the army in Israel, and I was finishing up in Israel, and I think all my friends in South Africa were pretty much either in the third year of their degree or in their honors year, all finished. And I really wanted to start studying. And a friend he's an actuary. He actually now lives in Israel. He said to me, he studied at a place called Wits, and he said, you know what, I think you'd like economics. It combines a bit of quantitative and a bit of qualitative. And I applied. And originally, when I finished school, I applied for computer science for three different degrees: computer science, economics, and psychology. And I was going to do one of them. So this friend said, "Oh, you should do economics." And I kind of didn't really think about it too much. I said, "Oh, yeah, that sounds cool." And, I finished on Sunday in Israel. And on Wednesday, I was in university in Johannesburg, at the University of Johannesburg. And he said to me I should go to the University of Johannesburg because it's kind of, it's very organized. So I don't know why that's a good reason to go to university, but I went there. And kind of as soon as I started to study economics, I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed from when I was young. I was always reading about, yeah. And I remember watching CNN when I was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I don't know if I knew exactly what was going on, but I mean, I just kind of, I grew up in a household where I was always reading about the news and politics and government, and I think it kind of came out naturally to me, just reading about the political situation and the economic situation. Um, And my grandparents also, if you know South Africa at all, in Johannesburg, there's a place called Sandton, which is kind of the business hub of Johannesburg. So both my grandparents were mayor and mayoress of Sandton. So it was kind of natural to me to kind of think about policy and that sort of thing. And so then I studied, and it was kind of, I came back from the army. When I was in school, I couldn't study at all. I think I spent most of my final school years, grade 11 and grade 12, reading about Manchester United on redcafe.net. And when I got back from the army, I could just sit and work for, I don't know, 12 hours, and I kind of just started to really love economics, not necessarily the accounting side of it, but just reading about central banks and financial markets, and just I guess maybe just how the world works. And then it kind of, first year, second year, third year, um, and interestingly enough, there was a subject called informatics, which I didn't know what it was at the time, but looking back on it now, I wish I had done it. Which is kind of, I think it's kind of, it includes a lot of programming and stuff. Um, and then, I did an honors degree in financial economics and monetary. And my first year out of university, I studied together with um, four other friends. Three of them went to the same company. It's called FNZ Group. It's basically a big fintech company where they kind of manage all client accounts for big investment houses. They basically, companies outsource to them. And I was there for a year, and it was super interesting work. But because I had studied economics, I really wanted to work in economics. Um, and then from that company, I moved to another company called ETM Analytics, and there was a friend that I had studied with. He was working there, and ETM Analytics is, in terms of South Africa, it's a very small company, maybe 8 to 10 people. It's an economic consulting company, and basically they provide real time. You can almost call it trading hints or trading advisory uh, for traders that are you know that are making trades based on currencies or the bond market or um, the derivatives market. Um, it's very interesting work because you kind of you're looking at Bloomberg all day, and now they have quants, and they have a lot of data analysis. When I was there, it was kind of, they were just trying to start getting that going, and they kind of, there's a lot of firms in the UK and the US that use them. The co-founder was a trader in the UK for 10 years, um, and yeah, so I think I was there for about a year. I learned a lot about the financial markets in that time, a lot, like really. Um, if you want to, I think if you want to learn about financial markets, you spend a year in a trading firm, you'll learn a fortune. Um, and then I always knew that I wanted to move back to Israel. So I felt that I knew that Israel's really competitive, and I knew that I can't just go back with a degree. I need to actually have work experience. So, so there was 4 years back studying, and then a year in the fintech company, a year in economic consulting, and then by then I felt that I had enough experience to get a decent job in Israel. Yeah, and that was around June 2016. Yeah, and then yeah. So I don't know if you want me
Okay.
to. uh,
No, no, that's fair enough. Obviously, if there's anything else that you want to cover as a result of that little transition, feel free to. Otherwise, no, I mean, it's good to get that exposure. And I know personally myself, especially after university, because at university, I did computer games programming, so a programming degree. And I remember studying economics afterwards, and I found it immensely interesting as well, like yourself. And when you really look into it, you find that it's a mix of literally every other field. Like there's maths in
Yeah.
there, there's psychology in there, there's obviously programming in there because these trading platforms, are
Yeah.
obviously programmed. There's every single field is all combined into this one field. You don't think it would be, but once you start studying it and learning about it, you realize it makes sense. Everything would be combined in it because it's a reflection of the economy, which is a combination of everything in the world.
Yeah.
So it does make sense that you would have a mix of everything. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people don't realize how complex and not hard necessarily, but how complex and in depth it is. It
Yeah.
is like really, but it can be really, really interesting as well. Personally speaking, I found it super interesting. Just studying it, what goes on, the different laws, the different theories, and just how things just fit together, and especially the math side of it. But again, obviously, I know that's not for everyone per se.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So
also, yes, sir. I
no,
just
no,
want to say in the
carry on.
in the UK now, there's so many quant funds that are, and I think a lot of places like that, they employ people, PhD in physics. It's kind of the financial markets are kind of going very engineering focused, and even people at ETM told me that it's just becoming, you know, if so, computer science is becoming in a lot of ways more relevant than economics in financial markets these days. Computer science, engineering, anything STEM related.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like computer science is one of those things I try my best to encourage others to teach, get their kids into some sort of programming, or to get them some sort of programming knowledge from a young age. And even if they don't want to become a programmer, it's like just learn it. It's
Yeah,
going to be one of those things that so many employers already are, and in the future are going to be. If you have programming, they're going to be like, oh, programming, because it'll be to the point where you'll go and try and be a lawyer, and because you'll be representing a lot of clients that are technology based or that have some sort of development side to them, the fact that you can speak the lingo, you understand the fundamentals of programming, they'll be like, okay, we want this person instead of the person that might have a bit more just regular, vanilla law experience. But I feel like
yeah,
most people don't listen, and they just see it as not a joke, but they still see it as like kind of a kid's plaything, and they're like, oh no, they don't need to learn computer science. It's like maths. There's so many people that could benefit if they was a bit better at maths, but they choose not to learn it because it's hard and they can't directly see how it applies.
yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny you say that because I had a friend in the boot camp who's a lawyer, and the different opportunities that he has now compared to if he was just a lawyer, which I mean, obviously in itself is a very respectable, profession. But um, and I also I went to an investor conference recently, and I met guys there who are, they're building. These are guys that have worked in, big four consulting firms and that sort of thing. And also, one of them self-taught software engineer, and they're building stuff to automate scanning legal documents. It's just uh, I really believe, obviously not everyone can learn it. My grandmother, who's 89 in Johannesburg, I don't think is going to learn how to program, but I think
Well, she doesn't really need
anyone,
to. Like, she's not that average person that's still,
yeah,
working or what. I mean, I don't know if she knows how to use a smartphone, but she doesn't really need
no,
to.
but also what you said about teaching kids. I mean, one of the people in boot camp with me, she's teaching her daughter, who's I think 5 or 6. From now she's teaching her already to, with these kids programs that teach you how to program. But yeah, I think
Yes.
you have to in today's day and age. It's almost, I think it's almost unless someone who's, you know that their career path, they want to, let's say they want to be in woodworking or something, maybe that's not necessarily, that they don't need programming, and even there's probably ways that you could use it for design and things like
Oh yeah,
that.
for sure. Especially with like CAD, for example, it might not be programming
Yeah,
directly, but it's
yeah,
still the thing is people will shun programming, and then as a result, they'll shun the computers and technology, and be like, like you said, oh, I'm going to do woodworking, but
yeah,
there's a very high chance that unless you're just doing a bit of woodworking hobby craft in your garage, if you're doing it professionally and trying to scale up, you're probably going to use some sort of CAD programs,
yeah,
and you might even be able to, with the programming skills, be able to create your own mini program or a potential plugin to one of these programs. And some of these programs
yeah,
do allow you to do a bit of scripting as well. So it's one of those things. Really, unless you're going to go and live in the woods and never interact with anyone, you're going to, you know, benefit from it. Yes, you can live without it, but it's like when the world got introduced to electricity or cars. Yes, you could live without those things, but you was at such a huge disadvantage that you was just making it harder on yourself. It's also like when people started using, obviously, phones. Yes, you could still send information via a letter, but if that's going to take weeks, back then, decades ago, to arrive, versus a phone call, which is instantaneous, i- i- how can you not be at a disadvantage?
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. It's yeah, uh, no words. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. Okay, so you worked at AI. What did you do at CrowdSense? And what does CrowdSense do again?
So CrowdSense is basically a social media intelligence platform. Right now, they focused on the cryptocurrency market,
Okay.
but basically, what they do is they have an algorithm that scans Twitter and Reddit and the the internet in general. It started only on Twitter when I was there, and they so I'll give you a bit of background in terms of just the founder and how it started. So the founder was previously, he was in a software engineering unit in the Air Force. He was an officer, kind of made his way up in tech. He was at Microsoft. He was one of the CTOs of Microsoft Israel. I'm not sure if it was the whole of Microsoft Israel or a specific division, but he definitely was a CTO. And he was kind of one of the early guys in Azure. I think he really helped to bring Azure online. Um, and he was in Seattle 4 years, and he started this company basically for flights. He wanted a system where he could get early information about something that could disrupt flights. So I don't know. There's a roadworks, or there's a big crash on the highway, or who knows what. So he started to, he used the Twitter API, and he built this system that can kind of pick up these different events. Um, and through that, he went to a conference and he met people from Cargill, which is I think it's an American company. It's a huge commodities trading company. And they said to him that, you know, the system, if it's able to pick up events that are happening around the world, this would be brilliant for commodity traders. Because commodity prices obviously are affected by, I don't know, oil field. Let's say I don't know if it's still going on, but at least in my time it was. The Saudis and the Iranians, they were always, with the drones, they were attacking each other's oil fields, and then the oil price would spike. And I don't know, maybe if there is uh, there's a coup in a country that exports, I don't know, copper, that sort of thing. Um, and they started to build a system aimed at commodity traders. And I had come from a background where I'd used Bloomberg at ETM and financial markets and whatnot, and also um, throughout my career I had worked in a couple of different companies post ETM and before CrowdSense, where I'd used a system called Data Miner, which is it's a really big company. I know it's worth a few $1 billion in America. And Data Miner is basically doing the same thing, but just looking for security events around the world, but not aimed at traders. Um, and So I'd used kind of both systems. And one of my housemates, that's actually in the apartment where I'm living now, he was a mentor at Barclays Techstars Accelerator in Tel Aviv. It was Barclays Bank. They were here for a few years in terms of, I think they were kind of looking for, young fintech startups that could benefit their clients. They now it's only Techstars, but at the time he said, "Oh, you should go speak to this guy from CrowdSense." And I went to speak to him, and I was kind of always looking to get into the tech world because I'd come into when I first moved back to Israel. I was working at PwC in economic consulting, and I always wanted to get into the tech world. So I went to speak to the founder, um, Elias. He calls himself Arias on LinkedIn because it's a bit easier to pronounce. But I went to go speak to him just as a casual conversation. And he was at this accelerator, the Techstars accelerator. And we went to have just I don't know, coffee, 30 minutes, and it turned into I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hour conversation. And it just happened to be really, really, really just happened to be that they came from a very strong technology background. The CEO and the CTO. The CTO had, I don't know, 25 years experience. Elias had run, you know, big teams in Microsoft, and he was VP R&D in a couple of companies. Not VP R&D, sorry, VP product. And the CTO had been VP R&D, and they had a really strong technology background, but they didn't have a background in financial markets and geopolitics, which is kind of exactly what the product they were trying to build was meant for traders, at banks, at hedge funds, that sort of thing. And in terms of understanding product market fit, they understood how the inner workings of what to do to make the product fit, but they didn't know who the product necessarily was for, or exactly who the product was for, and exactly why it was for them. Whereas I knew who it's for and why it's for them, but I didn't know how to make that happen from a technology perspective. So it kind of just made sense. It made sense that I would work for them, and it was funny because I remember at the time I had a full time job, so they, I think I worked for the first month and a half for free. That's how badly I wanted the job. So I would go to my job from either it was shifts, so I'd either go from 8 to 4, and then go to CrowdSense from, let's say, 4 to 8 p.m., or I would go to CrowdSense from, let's say, 10 a.m. until 2 p.m., and then from 2 p.m. till 10, I would go to the other job. So this was a month and a half like that. And then they made me an offer, and I actually took a salary cut because they'd raised money from Barclays Techstars, but they hadn't yet raised from angel investors. Um, so I took a salary cut, and then they raised angel investment, and then I got a much better salary, but I got options. But it was very, very interesting work, because it was kind of a mix of, I guess there was machine learning involved, and there was geopolitics and economics, and I wasn't on the, I would maybe do manual QA from the perspective of, oh, this button over here doesn't seem to be doing anything, or maybe we need to add something, maybe we need to add a menu over there, or um, maybe the events that pop up, maybe the real big events should be in red. But I wasn't, I wasn't a product manager. The CEO Elias, he had managed huge teams as a VP product. So in terms of the technical side of things, I didn't necessarily touch the technical side beyond a bit of manual QA, and it worked a lot in keywords, the algorithm, and so I was more on that side of things. What kind of words would we look for? What kind of events would we find interesting? Um, and yeah, it was fascinating. I mean, I the tech ecosystem in Tel Aviv is just so it's just such a well-oiled machine in terms of all the networking events and there's a lot of creative people here, and so I just kind of I was almost like a kid in a candy store. I'd go to a lot of these networking events, and Friday night dinner, you meet someone that I don't know could be relevant, or someone that would be interested to connect them with, or just kind of there's just nonstop. Kind of everyone's just trying to help each other. Yeah, I mean, obviously not being realistic. Not every single person's like that, but it was just a really interesting, fun time. Um, and I would, it wasn't necessarily part of my job description, but I would try to connect them with investors or potential customers, or clients. And try and just recruit people. A couple of my friends work there. One's still working there. He lives in Berlin. Um, yeah, it's just a very interesting company. And then basically they were originally focused on financial markets, and I'd always said to them, I think we should also cover the crypto market because the crypto market, there's not. I mean, there is news now, but back then there wasn't. There were news sources and stuff, but you didn't necessarily have real time reporting on different events for the crypto market. And then they actually pivoted to only the crypto market. Um, and they pivoted almost away from being, a live news source. Um, you know, when it first started, there were a lot of big companies that were really interested. We were introduced. I met someone at a conference that I went actually to with Ian, and he had come from London, and he knew some big trading companies. So those kind of companies, commodity trading companies, they were interested in the product, and some were looking to invest. But I think it was a bit early stage for them. So CrowdSense pivoted from that market into becoming almost like a Bloomberg for cryptocurrency. So just a full suite of analytics about cryptocurrency and that sort of thing, which is what they focused on now.
Okay, that's interesting. That's good. So I saw from your LinkedIn page you did something in the Israel Tech Challenge. What is that? Because that was separate to your university degree, so that was afterwards. So how does that fit in?
So Israel Tech Challenge, there's a lot of boot camps here, but Israel Tech Challenge was one of the first ones that was focused on English speakers. And there's a lot of French people went there also. But when I was working at PwC, I was always looking at what could I do. I mean, obviously there's Coursera and Udemy and YouTube, whatnot, but I was always looking at doing something that, someone could give me some first-hand guidance. And a lot of people that I met in Tel Aviv, back when I was working at PwC, they were people that they have a data science course and a full stack course and data analytics, but it's just most of the people do really well. Whether it's working in big companies or, there's one of the I don't know if you've heard of a company called Riverside FM. Um, it's a
Doesn't
it's a
ring a
big
bell.
no, so it's growing, but it's doing really well. They've got big investors and stuff. So they one of the founders, he went to Israel Tech Challenge, and it's kind of a lot of the people that have gone there have done really well. And I think it's the founder. The founder, he's a French guy, Raphael Uzan. So he served in one of these computer units in the army, and he basically built Israel Tech Challenge to kind of help immigrants to Israel to kind of skill up and to integrate into Israeli high tech. Not everyone stays here. There's a lot of people go back to the US and UK and whatnot. Um, there's a guy in a company called ULife in London. I think his name's Max Price. But I think he studied maybe history or something, and he did Israel Tech Challenge. Was a developer here a couple of years and went back to the UK. So it's not everyone stays in Israel. Um, but there's full stack development, which is what I did. We did the Maroon stack. My housemate actually did it a couple of years before me, but there they were using Python on the back end. So I think they try to keep up to date with what generally people are looking for in the industry from entry level developers or data scientists. But it's really good. It was insanely intense. um, I think it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, at least mentally and intellectually. Um, Basically, I mean, I don't know from what I've listened to other podcasts, talking about people's experience at boot camps, but um, I kind of got there, not really well prepared at all, um, and I kind of felt like they were just. It's almost like they would say, let's say if you had grown up, you were a little kid on the beach building sandcastles. They would do things like, okay, yesterday you built a sandcastle, and tomorrow you are building the Empire State Building. Good luck, you know. And it kind of just because you really have to, you have to do your best to try and build what they want, and they do send people away from the course. If you kind of, I think it's more they're looking for the right attitude as opposed to skills. So if they see that you're someone that you're just not putting in the effort, or you're basically just trying to copy everyone's work, or they do send people away. But you really, I mean, there's some people. I have a friend from Ukraine who kind of, I think he almost finished his engineering degree in Ukraine many years ago. But this guy's he's like he's a crazy genius. He took to full stack development like a fish to water. He could just sit and figure things out, and you give him a new technology, and within he goes and watches a 8-hour tutorial on YouTube over the weekend, and he just knows how to use it. So there were people like that. There were, I'm trying to think who else was. There was one guy, probably the best guy in the course. He's working in a stealth startup now. Um, I think he was working in construction and as a barman before. He's from the UK actually. He's been here for 10 years. But this is a guy that before the course he said he took 6 months and just all day and all night just sat. I don't know if he was. I think he's kind of on and off throughout the years since he was young. He's kind of dabbled in software development, but I think he took 6 months to just learn React and Node, and this guy was a machine. I mean, he knew more than the instructors. That some of them have studied software engineering and they've been in the industry 10 years. But this guy was just a real machine. And then there were people like me who maybe I had a good business background and I suppose a tech background, but I didn't come in with hard skills, um, no engineering degrees. But I got through it. I got through it by grit, I guess. Um, and super interesting. I mean, you meet the kind of people that, at least at Israel Tech Challenge, but I'm sure most boot camps, really interesting people from very diverse backgrounds. And yeah, and we also met the data scientists because it's the same building. And those people, the data science course there, you can't really get in unless you have a STEM degree. I mean, maybe if you're a crazy genius and you're a lawyer and I don't know,
Hmm.
you did Andrew Ng's course on Coursera, and you get some of these people that are kind of freak of nature genius. But generally, it's Israel Tech Challenge. Generally, is there's a lot of Israelis. Obviously, didn't start with Israelis, but with the Israelis, obviously they hear something's good, so they all want to join. A lot of very intelligent French people, um, and then a few from the UK, a few from South Africa, a few from America. One of my friends actually from LA who did the course, and he had been in Israel about a year, but he just went back to LA because he got a job there. It's the market now is really tough, so their placement numbers are lower than usual. They're not really hiring juniors in the market now. Um, but the course itself, I mean, I tried for years to kind of teach myself, which I knew I could use Python, and um, but I you know I was always spending a lot of my free time networking, and I was often working in crazy jobs. So I didn't really. I think to kind of learn on your own, you have to really dedicate time to it. And in this course, so I just spent 2 years in a program in Jerusalem for uh, learning about Judaism. So that's why I was able to take the time to make a career shift. Um, but I think you kind of need to sit at least 3 months. But I think you need to just sit all day and all night. I think that's the only way to learn. If you want to learn quickly, just to learn basic software development skills, I think it's not something that I mean, maybe, if you studied engineering or something like that, you can kind of shift quickly towards it, or electrical engineering. But I think if you don't necessarily come from that background, it's so difficult that it's not something you can kind of half do. You really have to. I mean, maybe if you take a year or two, and you learn on Udemy on the weekends, but at least for me, I needed to be kind of immersed in it.
Yeah, you
Um,
definitely have to commit yourself, because if you don't, not only does it take a long time and then that can be discouraging, the other thing is if you're leaving too long between, let's say, learning sessions, you're forgetting things that you probably shouldn't be, your foundations aren't, developing and
yeah.
setting into, strong core, and
Mm,
that does become a problem. Because I know as a programmer myself, I get people all the time asking how they can, get a programming job without a degree in computer science, or, not a degree at all. But as someone who's made the transition like yourself, what advice would you specifically give to help those that want to make that transition?
it's a good question because I've met all types in Israel. I've met honestly, I think probably there's some of the best software engineers in the world here. Obviously these guys and girls that come from these heavy technological NSA type units in the army, they have a major head start. And especially in Israel, people start really young. But I've also got friends that, I have a friend. He spent, he did an online degree from UNISA, it's like an open university. I don't know if they have that in the UK.
Yeah,
Like
they
just
do have a.
online.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
we have
So
open university here.
yeah, so he didn't even study computer science. He just did the degree so that when he goes back to South Africa eventually, because he was learning in a program learning about Judaism in Israel for probably 15 years. And a guy from South Africa said to him, you know what? He had a software development house in a place called Bet Shemesh, which is near Jerusalem. And he said, come and work for me for 3 months and I'll teach you how to program. So he went to work for him for free for 3 months and he was good. I mean, he obviously learned
Was that
enough in that
paid,
time.
or was it like a free sort
It
of
was,
internship?
it was free, but he employed him after that.
Okay.
So that guy, I mean, he didn't study a 4 year degree and he didn't do a boot camp, but I mean, he's working as a software engineer now. I think he's actually consulting for a British company now. Um, but so there's people like that, so it definitely is possible. And I've also met, you get people like Ian, self taught. Ian, I don't think he's looked at a course ever in his life. But, those are, I think those are the rare people. I think most people, I think there's a couple of ways to do it. Number one, you can go through Udemy or YouTube, Coursera, EDX, Udacity, name it. There's a course out there that will give you literally exactly what you need, but you have to be dedicated. Like you have to. It's like going to the gym. You know, if let's say in South Africa holidays are around December, summer holidays, and in the UK, in Europe, it's around July, right? Now, if you want to have a beach body, you can't go to the gym the day before, you know, and then go to the beach the next day and think you're going to have a six pack. It's a process of consistency, a consistent, focused effort. So let's say if I were to look back on my career now, when I first came to Israel, I had an option to do a boot camp when I first came to Israel. But let's say I didn't do a boot camp. I would say take maybe weekends because I know that if you're working, it's hard to in the evening go and watch a Udemy course and try and write the code, and things like that. But take a weekend and let's just say, I don't know, maybe a Saturday day. I don't know if people like to go out and party on Friday night or whatnot, but let's say Saturday day, and just take 3 4 hours, you know, and just be consistent. I think consistent, let's say 52 Saturdays over the period of a year is much better than 2 weeks, crashing 2 weeks in January. So I think that's one way to do it. It doesn't matter the platform. I think it's kind of at the end of the day, it's all the same. I mean, I personally like YouTube, um, because with YouTube you can see when was it uploaded, and maybe a big thing also is sometimes the technology gets outdated, and then there's one small thing that you need to change or update, and it doesn't work. And if you're not experienced in this stuff, if it's kind of your first time doing it, you're going to get a lot of people will get discouraged at that point. And then I would say find a mentor, someone that I've got in South Africa, in Johannesburg. I've got a friend that is one of these crazy genius type programmers. I think he went to university for a year, but this is a guy who can, he's basically an architect, but you can ask him any programming question from almost any language, um, and he'll be able to answer it. I'm not saying he's always able to fix it, but like he definitely knows what you're talking about, and he can definitely get you a lot further than you could get yourself. Um, and also maybe you can also find someone who's a mentor, who's just someone who kind of maybe just studied computer science, is working maybe as a senior developer or team leader or whatnot, that can kind of just every step of the way tell you, okay, learn this right now. Or if you want a code review, or I've got a friend who lives around the corner from me. He was an officer in a cyber unit in the army, and his company, he's in a startup. They just raised $28 million. They've got some sort of cyber tool. I don't even know what they're doing, but people like that are around you that you can just ask questions to, and I think that's super important. Otherwise, you can really feel, I think, a bit isolated. When I was doing the bootcamp now, so I had a lot of friends around me. Just in Tel Aviv, there's so many people, and just in Israel, that you can ask questions to, and they can give you guidance. So so pick a course, be consistent, find a mentor. Then you can do a boot camp. But I think super key for a boot camp is, if it's something in your head, and I've thought about it many times over the year. I did a data analyst course, a part-time data analyst course many years ago. It was twice a week for 3 hours. But if I had known that I was doing a boot camp now, and a friend gave me good advice, a friend who did the boot camp, and he's working as a software engineer now in Jerusalem, a friend from LA. He said to me, do Angela Yu's web development course. Now, I don't think it matters which course you do, whether it's called Steel or Angela Yu or something from YouTube or whatever. But just start from the beginning, and sometimes there's going to be things that maybe are a little boring. Like if you've done HTML and CSS, personally, I think you can learn that in like 30 minutes. If I was teaching a course, I would say, this is what HTML does, this is what CSS does, like play around with it for an hour or two, and let's skip to JavaScript. That's just my personal opinion, but I would say probably go through one of these courses and go through it thoroughly. Whether it takes you 6 months or a year, like if you're doing it part time, a year. If you can be like this English guy in my course, Yuval. He did 6 months before the bootcamp, but first of all, the bootcamp's really stressful, and you're learning a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. But if you can go in super prepared, then you can kind of just enjoy it, and they give you all the different assignments to do, and you can kind of just enjoy it. And I think also good is if you can run around helping people. It's also good for you to learn. If you're fixing somebody's made an error or that sort of thing. But if you go in super prepared, then I think you can enjoy it, and the chances that you'll get a job quickly are a lot higher. And obviously, you build a portfolio. And then what some people do, which is a little bit, in Israel, it's called chutzpah, which is like a little bit cheeky, but they'll go to a company and they'll say, let's say somebody is maybe self-taught and they have a knack for it, and they'll say, look, I've just built you this little feature, or I don't know, they'll kind of add something to an existing product. And then, a company might, especially if it's a small startup, a company might really like that. And I think also probably the best way to learn, and many people tell me this, is probably just to build something on your own. Kind of take the training wheels off. You know, I'd use the example like for me, I've got I wouldn't say a crazy knack for music, but I taught myself how to play piano when I was younger. And then when I went to this program in Jerusalem, I couldn't take the piano with me. So I said, okay, I'm buying a guitar, and my only outlet for music will be to have to learn to play guitar. So I could have watched a lot of YouTube tutorials on how to play guitar and bought books, and I just picked up the guitar and I learned. Someone had showed me some chords many years ago, so I practiced those, and then maybe I looked at like what's the chord shape for G or whatnot, but I didn't watch tutorial and tutorial and tutorial. I just picked up the guitar and just tried to play, um, and that's how I learned. Um, I'm not going to be playing in an orchestra or anything, but I can play guitar. And I think that's probably the best way to learn to code is to just say, okay, let's say I'm a Man United fan, right? So let's say, okay, I'm going to make a Man United fan website for Israel. And I'm going to have, I don't know, a database of all the different people that are members. And I'm going to, I don't know, have a chat room. And I'm going to have, I don't know, an automated emailing system and all like that sort of thing. And maybe I want to, I don't know, maybe I want to sell a few things. So I need to have Stripe. I have to connect to Stripe's API, that sort of thing. Um, I would imagine that's probably the best way to learn. It's just a little bit harder because it's not within a specific framework. So probably try to learn the skills before through a course or a mentor. But I think you're probably the best learning is when you're actually building things on your own. And then also, I think job wise, and they say a lot of this now in the market in Israel. So what I said before, if you can go to an employer and say, look, I just built you this little feature, or you can show one really good project that you built. That's not, you know, you can build. There's so many. I mean, you can go on Udemy and there's a React course of 50 React projects over 50 days. You can do stuff like that, and it's good. It's definitely good. But I think what would be more interesting to someone that's employing you is just something that you've done on your own. Because I think it shows also a little bit more passion. Because I think I was listening to a show the other day, and I think it's kind of true. But if you're super passionate about software development, whether it's data science or data engineering, data analysis, full stack development, front and back end, doesn't really matter. QA automation. But if you're super passionate about it, I think that makes the big difference. Like, for instance, Elias told me that when he founded the company and he was looking for CTOs. Now, this is a guy who, he was basically building Azure. He's been around the block a few times, and he said he spoke to Iran, the CTO, as one of the people, and he told him about the system, and he said the next morning Iran had built a whole system. It's that sort of, and there was also these developers in India working for CrowdSense, but they kind of they eat, sleep, and breathe software development. So I think, and I've seen this throughout my career in any field that someone is in, if they kind of eat, sleep, and breathe it. Now obviously you have to have family time and your wife, girlfriend, whatever, but in terms of your career, I think that's probably what makes the difference more than, I think kind of it's kind of fashionable to be a software engineer these days. Everyone wants to be
It is a
one,
bit.
but I think probably the best ones, at least that I've seen, um, my friend who's in this cyber startup, he so when he's decompressing his brain. He's playing computer games, or like I think the PlayStation, and then late in the evening. But his brain he's always thinking about software engineering. So I think that's probably people should try and get into that mindset. I heard this woman talking on a podcast the other day that she was, but I don't know, and maybe I'm judging, but it didn't sound like she loves software development, or it doesn't sound like she's curious about the world of technology in general. It sounds like she just, because it's fashionable, and you can work remotely and you get paid well, and it's exciting industry. But I don't know if she was in a country where you don't get paid so well in software engineering and you get paid well to be doctors, maybe she should be a doctor. So I think that's at least the best software engineers that I've seen. It's people that they really love it. Um, I've got a friend, just as a quickly as an aside. He also, I told you I have a friend is an actuary. Um, Now, in South Africa, actuarial science is pretty much the hardest degree by far. It's only the really, like the top people get through it. And you come to Israel and no one cares if you're an actuary because people here don't really know what it is. And I said to him, "Oh, I think you'll like data science." He kind of taught himself VBA when he was younger, and I could just see he had the same brain as a programmer, but he also has a very heavy math and statistics brain. So he did the data science course, and a few months before he did it during Corona, so he was in South Africa, which you can imagine this data science boot camp. They have these 5-hour exams. It's very intense, and he did a few months before he did University of Michigan Introduction to Python and all that sort of stuff on Coursera, and then he did the boot camp, and then he came to Israel, but he's happy to spend pretty much all his free time. Now he's starting to organize tech talks in Tel Aviv and things like that. But he pretty much spent all his free time um, here, and on the weekend he'd go out. But all his free time was getting better at data science. Obviously being an actuary, his stats is amazing, and his math also. But just becoming better and better at I suppose using Python and SQL, and I don't know what they use in data science. Hadoop. I don't know. I don't really know what they use, but um, I think that's more important than like which course do you do or which language do you learn. Or I think it's just I don't know, the passion, the desire to improve, get better, know more. And also I think the better you are, the more you can help other people. So I think yeah, but definitely also very, very key is just consistency. Because in programming, you're going to hit a lot of walls. But the really good programmers are the people that they kind of, I think that's, I would assume, is a bit more in the beginning. I mean, obviously you hit walls. I mean, I remember at CrowdSense, the server goes down. It's not a simple thing, but I think if you develop that ability to kind of just not let the walls intimidate you and say, okay, this is not for me. You just kind of push through them. I think that's what they were ultimately trying to teach us in the boot camp, more than the specific languages, and it was just that resilience. Because it will be hard at times, but I mean, I think I've had interesting jobs so far, but I find software engineering much more interesting than most other things. So I don't know if that's been your journey, but at least for me, um, yeah, just
Yeah,
the resilience.
obviously for me, because I have a degree in programming directly, so for me it wasn't a transition from an existing career path. I went directly after college into university when I was 18, studied computer games programming, graduated from there with a programming degree. So for me, doing programming has been a big part of my life since I was 16. I
Mm,
wish I had been exposed to it, earlier. I never did it before I got into college, and at college, the A level. You do it like 3 to 4 A levels. One of the
Mm.
ones I did was computer science, and that's where I learned programming. I remember as soon as I sat on a computer and I started programming, because that time we had like out of all like my friends, I was usually the first one to have like a computer, consoles, technology, that sort of stuff. So I was
Those
always
net.
ahead in terms of using technology than other people, but just never had really had coded per se. I remember doing a tad bit of Dreamweaver when I was a bit younger, but again, that was nothing serious. But when I first started coding, when I was 16 years old at college, and I sat there and I just was typing a few lines in Visual Basic because that's the first thing I learned,
Mm.
and just seeing it work, and I just gravitated towards it immediately. Because prior
Mm.
to that, my most experience I had with the nuts and bolts of a system was literally the nuts and bolts. I, used to build computers, buy the components. My dad was into that as well. So I was, yeah, and other family members as well. I was hugely into that. But I never really seen the software side per se. I was always into, pirating, modding, that sort of stuff, but not actually making it and coding it from scratch. So it was
Mm.
like, I remember I did computer science on the assumption that, because I didn't really know what it would entail, I knew it would be pretty hardcore to do with computers, but that was it. I did it on the assumption that we was going to be building computers and learning that. And I remember the first lesson we had, the teacher literally said, anyone that thinks that you're going to be building computers and messing around with components, you're in the wrong class. And I was like, I was so disappointed. But when we started coding, I was like, this is kind of even better for me. The way I'm enjoying this, and it's obviously that it's just gone from there. Yes, over the years I've learned new technologies, new frameworks, and and I didn't learn them at uni. So yes, I've used YouTube. I agree, YouTube is one of my favorite ones. Like you said, you can see when it was posted if it's a new video or something like 5 years old or
Yeah.
version, and you can easily, because it's all free. YouTube is, you can be watching a course and then say, okay, up to this point, the rest of it is not really that interesting or applicable to me. I'll jump over
Yeah.
to somebody else's channel or a
Yeah.
different playlist. Whereas if you're
Yeah.
on Udemy and you just bought one course, you don't want
Yeah.
to willy nilly jump from one course to another because that costs a fair bit of money. But
Yeah.
that does have the flip side that you're more likely to commit and finish a course. Whereas on YouTube, if it's free, you might, because you don't pay for it, you might not end up finishing it. So you do, risk that.
Yeah.
So that's overall been my journey. Because, like I was saying, I have a technical background. So for me to go and get a job or, talk about it, it's a little different from somebody that doesn't. So I was wondering, what things do you recommend to make people more employable for a development role when they don't have a formal degree? Like, what things can they do to make themselves more employable?
Um, Look, I know definitely in Israel and South Africa. I mean, this friend of mine, I told you, the one who's got no degree, he helped my friend
Yeah.
who did the science course. He helped him a lot. I think, look, obviously it's better to have a degree. Um, I went through a job interview now and they said, oh, you were really good, but you don't have the degree. So, I don't have necessarily the understanding of data structures and algorithms. So let's say, are we specifically referring to people that don't have a degree, right?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Um, I think just be good, really. Just build projects and do courses online. Um, mainly, mainly build a really good project. If it means that maybe you're someone you need to do a course before to learn how to use the stuff. Some people, they catch it more quickly. I don't know, but just um, build a really good project. Maybe if you're gonna have to, you're gonna have to go through technical interviews. So there's tons of there's a book I was recommended to me, the Cracking the Coding Interview. Um, but if you have to practice for coding interviews, like technical interviews, then do that. But mainly just build a really good project or two projects. I don't know, um, and I don't know if this works the same way in the UK, or I mean, I don't know if there's listeners around the world. I assume there are, but a lot in Israel, a lot works on personal recommendations and connections. So go to meetups. Meetups are super important. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed job, but first of all, it shows that you're interested. You know, to go on a Monday night or a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night or Thursday night, whatever night it is, to a meetup that is talking about that's something that's very specific to people using some sort of obscure technology, it shows that you're interested, which is the first thing. Then, you meet people that are working in a bunch of different companies. You talk to them over a beer and pizza, you make friends with them. Um, they can maybe, help you, get, maybe if it's a small startup, they'll put you in touch with the CEO, or if it's a bigger company with the HR. So that already helps you in terms of getting closer to getting a job. Um, there's tons of WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups and Facebook groups and Discord groups where you can join. A friend of mine in Tel Aviv, he started a Bitcoin community, you know, and I noticed that in one of the Telegram groups, there's, one of the founder of eToro is in one of the Telegram groups, like that sort of thing. It's if you guys have heard of eToro, it's a big
Uh, the
online
trading
trading.
platform, yes.
Yeah. So that sort of thing, just being passionately involved in the industry, whatever that means. It's going to meetups. There's tons of online tech talks. You don't even have to physically go there. Um, now in Tel Aviv, so now the Microsoft Reactor is doing a lot of events because, Google's got cloud services and Amazon has cloud services. So obviously, Microsoft with Azure, they want to attract companies to them and build an ecosystem around that. So going to all that sort of stuff. So if in the UK, I would imagine there's a lot of this kind of stuff all over the UK. I know I used a lot in Israel Tech Challenge, the Net Ninja. He's from the UK. Actually, my sister lives in London, just as an aside. But going to those sorts of things, um, you know, start a Medium blog. A friend of mine from South Africa, she did Israel Tech Challenge, and she's working at Wix now. But during the job search process, she started a blog on Medium, and she wrote about her post boot camp. What this one told her: go and have coffee with that one, and go to this investor networking event, and do this and do that. And it's interesting to read, and it gets you exposure. And I think kind of posting on LinkedIn, um, and I think also probably very important is being focused on what type of role you want. So I think in the technical side of the tech world, not just business development and sales, things like that, but the technical side. So, UX, UI, QA, front end, back end, data science, data analysis. There's something for everyone, but I think it's business intelligence. I think you have to be focused on what you want because otherwise you get pulled in a lot of different directions. And I remember, when I was first starting to get involved, I went and I got, courses on Udemy, and Ian said to me, this is many years ago, learn Python, and another friend that said, oh, learn JavaScript. And I think now I personally, I learned React in the course. I really like React, but I enjoy using Python. So for me, I think you know, I'll concentrate on Python, and I figured that I like business intelligence type stuff. And it took me a long time to figure this out, you know, but I think you have to kind of figure out what you like. So if you like more front end stuff, then probably concentrate on learning JavaScript and React. I don't know, maybe, I know React's very dominant in Israel, maybe Angular a little bit and Vue to a lesser extent. But kind of figure out what you want and then go and do a course based on that, and then build a project based on that, and then go to lots of events around that and join all the groups and start a blog about it. And this is really stuff that can be done in your spare time. It's just, For me, I would say there was only one job that I genuinely did not have time for anything else at CrowdSense. I mean, that was besides for the time I was sleeping, I was working. So, you know, but if you're in a job that you maybe have some time or you're studying, I think if you're studying and you're not studying computer science, try and, if you can at university, add it in as a minor. Or for me, that would have been to do informatics instead of investment management. That I've met, I'll just tell you for on. I had in this program in Jerusalem, I had two roommates from America, one in first year and one in second year. Now, the one in first year, when I was in first year and he was in second year, he was studying chemical engineering at the University of Illinois, and he had a minor in computer science. Both of his parents were, Russian American and programmers, and I would notice that he was always dabbling in code, especially in his second year. He would be building, he built a Tetris game, and I kept on saying to him, at this specific place, there's a whole program about personal development and like what do you want out of your career and what are your strengths and what are you good at. And I kept on saying to him, Zach, I know you're studying chemical engineering, but I mean, this is a guy who built his own motorbike. One of our friends left his laptop, his Apple laptop, on the floor once, and it rained, and it broke, and Zach fixed it. And he just had a very technical engineering type brain, and he would in his free time he would sit and build games and things like that. I said, why don't you just study computer science instead of chemical engineering? And he switched, and then he started to build Web3 applications when he finished this program. And I think he's almost finished his degree now. He's just got engaged. So I think there's that. And just in terms of if you can make it a major, but definitely try have it as a minor. And my roommate, when I was in second year, he also did computer science as a minor at Binghamton University in the US, and he was working as a data analyst at PwC. But I mean, because he did this minor, he could go to the bootcamp I went to and ace it. Just because all the stuff's not new to him, and he's got that technical brain, and he knows how to think in that way. But I would say find the place you want to be. Some people want to do UX UI, some data analysis, some data science, some front end, some back end. Go and do a course. Post a course, do a good project, something good, something that someone's going to be like. It doesn't have to be the best project in the world, but just that they get a sense, listen, this person can do what they have the potential to learn to be a good developer. And then go to all the meetups and get into the ecosystem. And all the WhatsApp groups, the Telegram groups, Facebook groups, and Medium blog. And once you're in that ecosystem and you're kind of showing presence, on LinkedIn, all this kind of stuff, I'd find it hard to imagine that if you apply to companies, try and go through people that work at the companies, referrals, always, rather than just clicking easy apply on LinkedIn. And go to all the events. I mean, I went to an event recently. A friend of mine, he's actually from London. His startup is in the Microsoft Accelerator in Tel Aviv. They're one of the best companies there. I think they were picked out of 70 companies. There were 3 companies picked. So I went to see him. I went to go see him. And that day at the Microsoft Accelerator, the co-founders of Netlify were there. And Netlify is a huge company. And it's a hosting service. But I could go and meet them because they were there. And sometimes you have to have a bit of courage. Sometimes people are friendly, sometimes not so friendly. But generally, I find most people in the tech world are friendly. I haven't really spent time in Silicon Valley, but at least in Israel. And you can meet crazy people. I mean, I went to a meetup once. I met co-founders of WeWork. I mean, it's not specifically a technology company, but just in general, the kind of people you can meet if you just go out there. And
So
people
I'm guessing
generally
that
are
was
friendly.
Adam Newman and what the
Yeah,
architect, or was it those guys?
yeah. Adam
How was
Newman.
that experience meeting them? Because obviously there's a lot of crazy stories about WeWork.
This was before all the stories, but yeah, it was a nice guy. Like I didn't speak for so long, but it's just interesting to meet these people that you kind of realize that we read all these things about them, or I mean, let's just say for instance, Netlify. Netlify is a $2 billion company, but the co-founders, most friendly, down to earth, humble. Um, it's the same thing with Adam Newman. I mean, I didn't really delve too much into just like high and by, but um, it's just good, I think, for networking purposes. And you never know. Sometimes you can get a job out of it. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Adam Newman, he was really friendly. I mean, a friend of mine saw him at synagogue a few weeks ago. um, but what's the other Miguel McKelvey? That's the other guy. Also, just very down to earth, humble guy. I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, a friend of mine, Ian. Ian used to host. There's an organization for immigrants to Israel that are working in tech. It's called Olim in Tech. Olim is the Hebrew word for people that move to Israel. He had one of the guy who invented the USB stick and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
yeah, in at least in Israel, but I think it's around the world. If you go to these tech meetups, you can meet crazy people, and you never know. It could be a job. It could be that they connect you with someone, and not just that. Just being in the. I mean, when I was young, I used to play Magic the Gathering. It's a card game, and it was also the same sort of culture. Like you would have these weekly meetups, and that's what you have to do. You have to be part of the ecosystem. Um, I mean, I'm not saying every software engineer has to go to every meetup. Sometimes someone just wants to go and do a degree and get a job, and that's it. But I think being part of the ecosystem is a good thing. And
Okay, so yeah, basically, there's different ways of going about it, and if you don't have a degree, then there are ways of meeting and connecting with people and making
yeah,
yourself more, attractive
100%.
through, contacts, which which is obviously good advice. It's also always one of those things. It's difficult to know what to do. So when you get a degree, it's almost like if you apply for, some jobs, especially if you just start at the junior level initially, you'll get one, and then you can go to mid after a few years and senior. Whereas it
Yeah,
can feel daunting if you don't have the degree, even if you're just as employable as the person with the degree. It's just it feels like you've got some sort of anchor that's holding you down. And it's like, how do you
yeah,
get rid of that?
yeah,
I noticed that you have a lot of LinkedIn certifications, so I got a
yeah,
couple of questions about them.
yeah.
One, how do you go about getting one? And two, how helpful have those LinkedIn certifications been when getting a job?
It's a good question. Um, so it depends. So some of them are full-on courses, like a Udemy course would be. It just takes maybe a few days, and then you would have, they
How
have
much
these
do they
quizzes.
cost?
Those are, I mean, you have to sign up for LinkedIn Learning, but the courses
Yeah.
itself are free.
Okay.
Um, Look, I don't want to make like a political statement about LinkedIn versus Udemy or whatnot, but I think in terms of probably, I know Zach, my roommate, when I was in this program, he used LinkedIn Learning to learn everything about what he knows about software development. I mean, obviously he had done it in university, but he said that he had it for free from his school, and he didn't use Udemy. He used LinkedIn Learning, so you can learn everything there. Some of their courses are a little bit outdated. I don't think it's as updated as what you would find on Udemy or YouTube or maybe even Coursera. I don't know, but I think you can learn if you want to. It's a very comfortable platform to use. Um, I think you could pretty much learn everything you want there. Um, and then they have courses on everything. They have courses on software engineering. They have courses on sales. They have courses on personal development. So there's a bit of everything there. In terms of a job, probably what would be more useful than LinkedIn course certifications. I mean, obviously, if it's React Essentials, and it's better than not having it. But probably more better for a job would be like passing the LinkedIn skill assessments, I think.
Okay.
Um, but I would say probably, and I would imagine also in Israel. I mean, if I was employing someone at CrowdSense, I think if I'd seen, you know, let's say they have, let's say rather on Udemy, they have um, the React from A to Z. The types of Udemy courses. If I'd seen that someone had gone through a Udemy full React course or a full, I don't know, Node.js course, whatever, um, that would probably be more impressive, I guess, than a LinkedIn learning course. But obviously, you got to have projects to back it up, and you also got to be. I don't know if they do this around the world, but at least in Israel, they often do technical interviews. So, I mean, you can have all the LinkedIn certifications in the world, but if you can't pass the technical interview, you know. Um, but definitely, if someone doesn't have anything, I think LinkedIn Learning is kind of Udemy sometimes can be a little bit difficult to use, like because there's so much on there. Whereas LinkedIn Learning is a little bit more user friendly, and it's a little bit, in some ways, a little bit more. If someone's in business already, they've got I don't know, they're working as an analyst at a bank or something, and they want to learn how to use Python. LinkedIn Learning is a good one. Um, also, I think let's say you finish work at 6 p.m. and you're sitting there on LinkedIn Learning afterwards, learning Python. Your employer, I would assume, would be a little bit more friendly towards that than maybe seeing something that's like a Udemy course or a YouTube course that maybe you get distracted. I don't know, but I think if you want LinkedIn certification, then you've got to do like the React Essential or Python Essential, or I mean, I've done a few courses that are not necessarily software development, but I think I did those more when I was first getting into it. Um, I did one now recently on Cypress testing. I mean, it's pretty good, but it was because I was interning in a startup, and they wanted to start to implement Cypress. But again, I think probably the best, and my friend says that also the best experience is just um, actually using it rather than the certifications.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure. Yeah, in
yeah,
terms of practical experience, but obviously, I'm just more curious in terms of getting that job. Initially getting your foot into the door with a company, because you can have all the skills in the world, but if you don't have a degree, you don't have a portfolio, so you don't have any certifications, you don't have any past references, you don't have anything other than your word to go by. I'd say it's going to be probably very difficult without some contacts to get
yeah,
a job. So obviously that's the reason I'm interested to know. Obviously you got to have the skills. You've got to learn it, whether that's LinkedIn Learning, whether that's YouTube, whether that's something like Code Academy, or
yeah.
just doing it yourself and looking at documentation. But again, that'll give you the knowledge. But what's gonna you know persuade other people that you have the knowledge?
So,
That's like the
mm.
thing.
so look, I mean, I found sometimes with Udemy that the courses were really long. So that I don't know if maybe I was, the maybe now, post the bootcamp, I could sit through the course. But I mean, when you see a course on Udemy that's like 40 hours, and I mean, I know it says 40 hours, but that's often you can times that by 4 or 5. The amount of time. If you get a bug, and if you maybe a package is outdated, and who knows what.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure.
whereas LinkedIn Learning is sometimes a little bit quicker. Um, I mean, if you look on it, you can see sometimes it's just a Python training could be like 2 hours or 4 hours. So in some ways, I would rather sit through that, and even if it takes a few days or a few weeks, rather than you know, let's just say Angela used Python course, 100 days of code, I think it's called something like that. That can take probably months. Which is probably really good, but if you just want to over a weekend or 2, 3 weekends kind of get a feel for things, in that way, LinkedIn Learning can be a little bit better. Um,
A
yeah, I
bit
mean, I
better
think also
from that perspective.
uh, yeah, I think with employers, if they see 1 or 2 certifications and they see that you've got a good project on GitHub and you can pass the technical interview, I think they wouldn't necessarily look where you did your. I mean, obviously, if you've got a good degree, it's way better. But and if you've
Yeah,
done a boot
I
camp,
mean, like the thing that really interests me, like all these questions that I'm asking, because like I said, I get a lot of people all the time asking this sort of stuff. How do they get the job? And it's like, how do you get to that point where they'll give you the technical interview? Because obviously, first you got to apply, and then they all. I mean, there's a very good chance that you'll have a regular interview
mm,
before the technical interview. So how do you even get to the point where if you apply, they'll want to interview you? Because obviously that's what if let's say somebody applies for a job, they've got 5 years experience in being a software engineer at Tesla, 2 years at Google, 3 years at Microsoft, a degree from Harvard, and a master's from I don't know MIT. There's a very good chance if they apply
yeah,
for a programming degree, a
yeah,
programming job, they're going to go to the interview stage.
yeah,
They might be rubbish, we don't know, but
yeah.
just based on those credentials on paper makes them attractive. So that's why, like, I try and figure out, like, when I'm talking to people, especially that have done a switch, what are those things that really was just a waste of time and you
So
probably could have just skipped, and what was essential? Because obviously, bouncing off that, how important is knowing tools like Slack, Jira, and GitHub for getting a job, and showcase, or like essentially saying that you know them on your CV? And
mm.
what? And a second part question to that: why did you choose GitHub instead of an alternative like GitLab?
So GitHub, I'd always only ever known GitHub. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing of GitLab, but
Okay.
everyone talks about it. I mean, I would personally say GitHub is way way more important than Jira and Slack. I mean, Jira, I learned it in the internship I did recently, how to use it. And Slack, I remember when I wasn't yet in the technology industry and people were talking, oh, on Slack, and I was like, what's Slack? I felt left out. Um, Jira and Slack, I mean, it's nice to know, but I think people really care about, can you do the work or can't you do the work? Like um, I remember, just for instance, we had a guy in our course. Okay, this guy from Miami who had a computer science degree, but he was not the best guy in the course. The best guy in the course was a guy, I told you, this guy from the UK who was a barman. But I think at least in Israel, maybe in America, if you're trying to work at Apple or something, or Amazon, or um, one of these really big companies where you've got to. I would assume you probably need to have a very good theoretical understanding also, which maybe a degree gives you more. But in Israel, it's much less formal in that sense, because a lot of the best engineers come from straight from the army, where they don't do a degree, right? I mean, there are people that do a degree, but they have these that the army has basically like almost like boot camps, and obviously the people are picked before that. They think they're people that anyway would be good
Mosh,
at.
Mosh, can you just give me 1 minute? Just somebody's at the door.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hit pause, and then I'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so we are back. Sorry for that little delay. And what was you just last saying, Mosh? Because we were talking about tools like GitHub.
Oh yes. Okay. So yeah, I think GitHub's super important. I mean, that's where you're showing your skills on GitHub, and I guess try to keep it updated. I think if you can show a good project on GitHub and you can pass the technical interview, you probably get the job. If they, I mean, obviously they can have to want to work with you in terms of your personality, but GitHub's super important. Everyone in Israel says, have a good GitHub. Um, what else? I think, yeah, genuinely just being good at development, whether that's front end, back end, data engineering, whatnot. Just be good at it. You don't have to be. I mean, no one's, and I think this is in Israel also. No one's expecting you to be as good as someone who did a degree. Um, if unless someone's done a degree and they've never built an application before, and you've spent 3 months building applications, then obviously they'll expect that you have some level of understanding. But I think a lot of bootcamp grads and people that are self-taught, a lot of people know that you don't have the same theoretical background as somebody who studied computer science. Or for instance, my brother just finished his electrical engineering degree in the software engineering track at Wits University in Johannesburg, and he's working as a machine learning engineer now, straight after he finished his degree. And I know that it would take me a very, very long time to try and have his level of understanding of computer science, many years. So I know that I don't have that, but if you kind of, let's say someone hires you just to build, I don't know. This is a good thing also. Sometimes you can take on just I want to call it consulting, like freelance projects. Sometimes I don't know. One of my friends that I was living with, his girlfriend many years ago, she was from America, and she knew how to do some basic front end stuff with JavaScript and HTML, CSS, and someone paid her. One of her dad's friends paid her to just build a basic web page for him, something like $2,000, for 2 weeks of work, and that sort of thing. When you can start to just generate some sort of traction, and you can show that you understand what you're doing, and you know um, you can do the work, then um, I think that's a lot more impressive to prospective employers. Even just a basic web page like that, then whether you've done Udemy or Coursera or a bootcamp, I think it's really just about being able to do the work at the end of the day, and also showing that you're interested in it. In the startup that I was interning recently, there was a Ukrainian girl who was living in Germany, and she had studied medicine of all things, but I guess she just had more of a passion for software engineering, and she taught herself React, and she's been working as a developer for 4 years, a front end developer. So
Okay,
um,
that's good.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, definitely for sure. You GitHub's again, my personal recommendation is the same. GitHub's very important, and like personal reason I chose GitHub over some of the other alternatives. It's a bit more user friendly, and it's a bit, I'd say, better for showcasing your own project slash smaller side. For I feel like GitLab, if you're within a company and they got a slightly larger project, it's more private then and not like public facing, then GitLab can have its advantages. But just Git in general, but especially GitHub, why did you choose web development over another programming field?
um, so I had looked into data science a few years ago, but I realized I don't have the math background for it. I mean, I did a bit of math in my economics degree, but I think we did math only in the first year, and maybe in the honors degree in financial economics a little bit. But I remember going to just to a few classes just to see what it was like, and the math was just way beyond my level. And I think you know at least people that come from South Africa, the people that do the data science course of this bootcamp, they did electrical engineering or actuarial science. These are really mathematical degrees. And data analysis, I mean, I find it interesting, but um, web development, I don't know. It's just, I think it gives you a bit of everything. You can build applications. I remember I had an idea for a business, and I couldn't do it because I didn't have a web developer. And I always remember feeling stuck in terms of that. Like all these ideas, but couldn't actually build them. And now I feel a lot more empowered in that sense that I can actually, maybe I would have to, I would have to get someone to help me, just to, if it's really high level stuff. But then I can build a basic application, And I mean, even now, I met someone, these two students at one of the universities here, that they have an idea, but they both working in QA, manual QA, and they don't know how to develop an application, and I can do it for them. Um, so that sort of thing. And I felt that also just the web development course was giving you a good foundation that, you know, if you want to add data analysis, you can do it. If you want to add some data science, maybe I'm not going to be the one building the algorithm, but I can still dabble in that realm. Um, I just felt that it was much more suited towards me because there was much less of a mathematical component to it. At least the bootcamp that I did. The data science, you've got to have a fancy STEM degree, and for the full stack, I mean, if you've got an engineering degree, you're probably going to catch it much quicker. But it wasn't necessarily a major part of it, and I liked I liked the feeling of freedom that I could create things that interest me. And my mom's got a business in South Africa. Um, I can help her. She's got she sells jewelry. I can build her an online store, that sort of thing. I just my uncle sells watches. Just a feeling of a bit more of a sense of freedom and creativity. Um, and data science is super interesting, but I'm not sure I would be wanting to do one thing all the time, if that makes sense. Whereas with
Yeah. Fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah, programming is a very varied field. You could do web development for 5 years. I mean, within web development, you have so many things you can do, and
yeah,
obviously, AI is becoming a huge part of that now. And then, I mean,
yeah,
you could go into mobile development, and within that, you got so much, discipline. You got, the UI side, you got the AI side, you got the just the core back end side. I mean, and then you got game development, networking, and like there's so many fields within programming that you could just tap into. So yeah, like you said, you aren't fixed per se with that. So
yeah,
I remember you were saying before the podcast that you're in between jobs now. How are
yeah.
you finding the job
Oh,
market? What are you doing to try and what's your next steps?
so interesting you asked that. So I'm kind of in process with two companies now. Um, kind of different roles. One is a bit of like a mix of business and programming, and the other one is more pure programming. Um, so I just need to see what's going to happen with that. Hopefully, in the next few weeks, I'll know. The next 2 weeks, I guess.
Okay.
But in general, it's people say, let's just say, just take Israel for an example. But I think in general, the tech world was, and I can kind of talk about it a little bit because I come from this background. But basically, what we had in the world was we had a lot of free money from central banks, right? A lot of
Hmm.
free money running around to different investors, and the cost of capital was a lot lower, and they were throwing money at most companies around the world. And I remember in Israel, it's a year ago, you were getting these companies that were, oh, we just had a round of $200 million or $300 million or $400 million, and that funding wasn't backed up necessarily by results. So now, we had a bit of a wobble in the global economy. So suddenly, and in, um, that money is not floating around as freely as it was before. And companies actually have to show results, and they have to like show why they're hiring people. And so basically, if you were a junior a year ago and you finished a boot camp or finished a university degree or self-taught, whatever, the chances that you were going to get hired were a lot higher, and I'd get hired much quicker. Instead of 2 months, it was, instead of, let's say, 8 months, it would be 2 months you would get hired, or 3 months. Now, I mean, a recruiter told me the other day, and I've had one, I think I've applied to maybe like 50 or 60 jobs, and I've had maybe two interviews. One was maybe, I think, was just a bit advanced for me. Um, but now I'm in process with two companies, but the one recruiter, she said to me, "Listen, we're not hiring juniors anymore. We're only looking for seniors because and I can speak about it from being in Crowdsense, with startups and I mean, obviously Israel's got some growth stage companies, but growth stage meaning they're not a startup anymore. They're actually a functioning business and they've got thousands of customers or businesses or users, whatnot. But they want people that can kind of hit the ground running. They can sit down at the desk first day and they can do the work. Maybe they need a day or two or a week of orientation, but they'll immediately be able to do the work and they don't have to be trained. So, a lot of university grads, and in this sense, university grads are in a way better position, at least in Israel, than bootcamp grads, because university grads generally will pick up within 2-3 weeks, a month. They'll pick up a lot, whereas bootcamp grads don't have the theoretical background as much as university grads. So for juniors at the moment in Israel in general, it's very, very tough to find jobs. I mean, out of my bootcamp, maybe there were close to 40 graduates, 8 people got hired. And then the cohort after us, which was maybe like a month or two later, or 3 months, I think there were 70 or 80 people in that cohort. So you kind of have a situation now where there's so many people looking for jobs. And anyway, they're only looking for, in general, seniors. And there's a lot of people getting laid off. So I heard an interesting insight from someone who runs a VC fund in Israel. And he said that, you know what? Maybe this time what's going to happen is that we're going to get lots of startups because out of necessity, people are just going to, a lot of people are doing, free internships to get coding experience. But also people will start businesses because out of necessity, they might be a small business to start. And maybe it's a business that's just, all we do is we help you build a web page for your e-commerce business or things like that. But in a sense, I think, and this is something I've kind of had throughout my career, and I heard this from someone you can look at someone called Martin Mashal, Dr. Martin Mashal. He's a big technology entrepreneur, and he runs a big VC fund and a big accelerator in Israel. His VC funds in London and the US and Israel called Entry Capital, ENTREE, and his accelerator is called Sigma Labs. But he said that you have to just try and always learn where you are and kind of, just adapt to the situation. So now, yes, you could say, oh, they're not hiring juniors and there's all these layoffs, but you got to see where's the opportunity. And the opportunity is, number one, maybe, they don't want to hire, if you're a really good junior, like this guy who was in my cohort, Yuval, you're going to cost a lot less than someone who is a senior or a team leader or so maybe it's in that sense you can say, okay, like that, I'm going to go to this company and say, okay, I'm going to try and build something interesting for them, even if it's something small. And maybe they don't want to give you the best salary to start, but you just need to get a foot in the door. Once you get a foot in the door, after like 6 months, 8 months, you're something. And then from there, like this in the tech world, generally the salaries go up quite quickly. And you might join an interesting startup where who knows, maybe you get equity. I don't know, but that's one thing. Then also there's more opportunity to start businesses because you're not just going to slot in at a big tech company or as maybe you would a year ago or a year and a half ago. And then also, you can start your own small software consulting business that, will help you build a web page or we help you do this or that. And just kind of try to see where there's opportunity because, I mean, look, for me, I've wanted to study computer science for such a long time and I finally got through it and the bootcamp was really tough and I got through it. And the last thing I was expecting that, there was going to be this sort of environment economically for the tech world. But I think it's okay. I think it just means that you have to You have to be a little bit craftier in how you go about things. And obviously, your LinkedIn should be really good. Um, you didn't speak about that so much, but just try and have a link to your GitHub on your LinkedIn. Have a link to a small. I mean, I made a personal website. I could have done a whole project on just a personal website. I went on a website called Site123.
Okay.
It took me 10 minutes. Just a few personal details.
Hmm.
Um, it was really easy, and I've got a link to it on my LinkedIn. It just tells a person a bit about me, but it's got a link to my GitHub. Maybe it's not the fanciest GitHub in the world, but it's something. And then you can also include, if you have a Medium blog, you're writing about your journey in software development, and then just try and have, you know, let's say you're going for front end developer. Try and include everything in your career up until then, where you've done things that are related to front end development, even if it doesn't seem significant, and try and make your job roles sound more like front end development. Even if it's, I don't know, was in charge of managing the content on a website. So make that into something like managed website, or like, you know what I mean? Dress it up a little bit. Um, so I think that's really good LinkedIn, really good GitHub. Um, it's probably worth investing a few hours in a good LinkedIn page. With one of my friends, just last thing, from the boot camp, he's a really good developer, but his LinkedIn was kind of non-existent, and it took us 3 hours. But I mean, now he's got his GitHub is kind of like really featured, and he's got a link to his website, and his career kind of makes sense, and it's obvious that he's very passionate about software development. Um, so yeah, like you got to think, especially you go on LinkedIn and you see, I don't know, junior full stack developer, and there's like 1,000 people applied, and you've got to think, someone who's in HR, who probably doesn't know what full stack development is necessarily from the technical side of it, how do they, whether they've got automated programs, that look for keywords on people's LinkedIn skill set, which is actually important. You've got to have the keywords in your skills that they're looking for in all these job descriptions, but you've got to make yourself stand out a little bit. So, that's why you've got to go to meetups and all this stuff, because if you're just one of the people within the pool and you kind of don't stand out, you could be the best software engineer in the world, but the chances of that someone even knows about you, let alone picks you for a specific role or wants you to co-found a company, are lower. So you've got to kind of, as much as, unfortunately, as much as, you know, we would want it to be that it's only the best, based on merit of how good you are as a software developer, it's also part of it that you have to do the networking and your GitHub and your LinkedIn, but you can use that to your advantage if you're just willing to invest in it a little bit, I think.
Yeah, yeah. A big part of it is how much are you willing to sell yourself, and like you were saying, spruce up, your roles a bit. What you did, and I know a lot of people do struggle with the notion of doing that. They feel like they're cheating somebody or that they're lying, and I just simply say that spruce it up as much as you want, as long as you are capable of doing the role that you're applying for.
Right.
So, I mean, even if there were some lies in there, but if let's say you applied to a full stack developer role and you was capable of doing it at that level that you are applying to, I don't see any real harm if there's any, you know, things that have been a bit exaggerated or even false things in your CV. If you're able to do that job to that level, because at the end of the day, ultimately the client, the company wants you to be able to do a job. If you can do it, then that's great. Obviously, if let's say you've never laid bricks before and you say you're a house builder,
Yeah.
then obviously you're gonna have problems. But let's say if you're a developer and maybe you just haven't quite done this little aspect of it, but you know that employers probably aren't going to hire you if you don't have that little thing, but you'll just pick it up, then I don't see any harm in putting that on there. It's when you don't have any programming skills at all, and you're like, oh yeah, I want to become a senior developer at 100,000. Then obviously you're gonna get issues, and then that's
Mm.
obviously where things start to go wrong. So
Yeah.
that's my overall opinion of it. So uh, towards the end of the podcast, what I always like to do, because I've gone through all of my general, more specific questions on your career and what you do, and I always like to ask some fun generic questions. So the first one and the main one that I have that I always love asking is, does money buy you happiness, and why? And bouncing off that, what does a good life mean to you?
Sure. So big questions. Does money buy happiness? I definitely don't think that's true. I think it makes life easier in some ways. So I heard an interesting thing once that if you think money is not important at all, it will become the most important thing in your life. Meaning, if you kind of dismiss money as not being important, then you might land up in situations that you might be irresponsible with money, or you, I don't know, might think you're worth less money than you're worth in terms of a job, or who knows what. But I definitely don't think it's the most important thing in life, and I definitely don't think it makes people happy. I think people that are happy are people, which is kind of maybe connected to the second question, is what's a good life? I think a life where you fulfilled and fulfill your potential, uh, whether that's, I don't know, being a construction worker or being a data scientist or community leader, or but just making the most of yourself. And I think also uh, giving more than taking in life. So, helping people, I guess. I think that's what is a good life. I mean, in my family, my grandparents kind of were all community based people, always doing things for the community. So I think that. I mean, it's kind of sad in today's world, you have in social media, people that are just traveling around the world, and it looks like they never work, and it looks like they never sweat, and they never put on weight. It's like, it's not reality. And
No, I remember seeing an image of some fitness influencer, and there was like a picture of how they, obviously it's kind of become cool to, uh, you know, pull back the curtain now. So I'm not giving them any credit or anything, but they were showing how they look at the pictures that they show, and then they were looking showing at how they look generally sitting down in normal lighting
yeah,
on a day to day, and it's like they you wouldn't call them fat, but they definitely wasn't
it's a complete
the
joke.
pictures that you would post, and that's like the vast majority of. I mean, that's like everyone there. So it's like seeing one person on a single day. For let's say a single hour where they're very upbeat, very happy, everything going right for them. The sun is shining out of from their face, but I'm thinking they're just happy all the time and everything going great for them all the time. It's just not the case. So yeah, there's definitely, because of social media, a lot of social anxiety of trying to keep up with other people, and the people that most people are trying to keep up with aren't even real, or they're not. What they're showcasing isn't 100% real, and so
Yeah,
yeah, you definitely gotta be happy with yourself. That doesn't mean, in my opinion, you stop growing, that you stop trying to do better, whether that's, a better job, maybe more money, better relationships, being healthier, being, in better shape, all of that stuff. But then also understanding where you are now, unless you're at a life or death situation, and let's say you're really overweight, you're really unhealthy, or you know you're broke and you're on the streets, then obviously you've got to really focus on those few things, money,
yeah,
health, eating, whatnot. You like that; those should be your sole focus. But
yeah,
otherwise, understand the other stuff. It might take a bit of time, because you see social media and you see someone that's 17 years old and has just sold his company for $1 million,
yeah,
and that can feel really disheartening. But you just gotta realize that that's not the vast
So
majority of people, and not to take away anything from that 17-year-old, for example, but there will be, if you look at the story, there'll probably be, he's a lot of it is the right place at the right time, or he had a certain upbringing that really helped him. Again, credit where credit's due. He's done really well, or she's done really well, especially when they do it at a young age. But does not mean that if you have not achieved that and you're 30, you're 25, you're 35, that you can't still do amazing things. He's got to keep
100%.
on going.
I've got a funny story about that just quickly. So one of Ian's friends, this is a few years ago. I think I was in between jobs, and this guy, he had studied in good places, and he was really intelligent, and I think his family had some money, but he had been involved in a couple of startups that just nothing had really taken off, and he had this kind of crypto based startup, and I was going to do some. I think he made a bot that would go into Telegram groups, and maybe it was maybe just a bot that would answer people's questions about crypto, something like that. I can't remember exactly. And for a few years, nothing really worked out, and he was just trying. Maybe 3 years, I don't know exactly. And then when I went to this program in Jerusalem, I think I messaged Ian, and I was like, "Wow, this guy's company, like this friend of his, just raised $400 million." I was like, "What the hell's going on?" You know. And every few months, more money, like 200 million. This, you know who it was? The founder of Deal. If you've heard of Deal, it's like his name's Alex Boazes, and this guy for years was just trying and trying, and nothing was working. And if you would have asked me when I was going to do a little bit of work for him, it was like maybe one or two people in his startup, not Deal, a different one. I wouldn't have known, and he was just determined to make it. And luckily, there was good timing with the market. Deal basically helps you pay people around the world without having to go through all the legal rigmarole. So it was perfect for Corona, but the company is doing really well now, and you never know. So you got to just keep plugging away. That's the truth. I really
Yeah, I
believe
mean,
that.
I know personally speaking from my own career, my own life, that yeah, you've just got to keep going and don't. I mean, my advice is don't revel in success for too long, because
Yeah,
just as the sun has shined on you, it will eventually move as the sun does onto somebody else, and then you'll be
100%.
stood there thinking, why am I not the center of attention anymore, or why am I not important anymore, or the hot thing. But you just keep on going. Obviously, enjoy your success, but just keep on moving to the next thing. And likewise, if you've had some failure, or things aren't quite going your way, just that's not the end of the world either. Just keep on moving, keep on going, and I'll say just step back sometimes and just think about the other things that are going on in the world, everything that's going on, like the earthquakes in Syria, for example, or just, I mean, there's plenty of bad stuff that if you really want to think about them, you can find plenty of
Totally.
bad stuff to, think about. You literally think about them for a minute and realize, okay, I am actually pretty lucky in my life in the position
Yeah.
I'm in. And I want to have a few more things. I want to achieve more stuff. It'll happen. Just slowly, just keep on working on things. Remember, I saw an analogy a little while ago, and it was like a little picture, and it was a man that was digging for oil, and he would dig 1 mile down, and then actually no, 1 mile to do it. Let's say he would dig 100 meters down, and there was no oil. And then he would dig another 100 meters somewhere else. There was no oil. Then he would dig another 100 meters. There was no oil. He did like that 5 times in the image. And then there was one person that just dug 500 meters down in the one place, and it was just the oil was just a little deeper. That's all it was. And that's just life, that if you just keep at it, I'm not saying it's impossible not to be successful, but it's very hard that if you keep at it for years and years and years, and you're actually good at what you're doing to a decent level, you don't have to be amazing, but you're good, something's gonna happen. Like either somebody's gonna recognize you and want to work with you, or throw some work your way, or what it is. You'll create some sort of relationship, some sort of networking, stuff that you wouldn't have realized. So don't, again, that's the thing, I'll link it to do with education. Don't think, okay, I'm learning programming, so I don't need to know maths, or read books, or learn about the economy. Because what you'll realize is that once you start learning these other things to a certain level, you're bound to just have opportunities that come your way, or that come your way and you can actually see that they're an opportunity, and you're equipped to actually capitalize on those opportunities. So have a broad range of skills. Have your one or two core things, but then have a broad range that allows you to, regardless of what comes along, for you to just jump on it.
Yeah. 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 Very true.
Yeah, so I mean that's all the questions I've got for today, Mosh. I mean, it was a great podcast. Love to
Yeah.
have
Thank
you
you.
on again sometime, and it's great hearing from your journey at Date Night, CrowdSense, and all the people that you met over the years at Israel as well. Like Adam Newman from WeWork and some of the other people as well. I mean, that's definitely advice I'm going to give to others, is that especially trying to get jobs for in programming, is go to networking events. That's one of the things I very rarely say, but that's definitely a good one, because it's free as well, and that you can usually find ones not too far from where you live. Plus, just kind of piggybacking off that, you can find online ones. So if for whatever reason you can't travel, you can find an online one. It's not the same experience, but you can still attend something, and
Yeah.
somebody in there, even if you don't talk, somebody might just drop some nugget of advice, or somebody might talk that's in the same situation as you, and you're like, oh, they're in the same situation. Somebody's given them just this advice that'll help me as well. So that will be my recommendation as well. So yeah, thank you for coming on, Mosh.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
great
you so
having
much.
you on.
That's awesome.
Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast as well, because it's not just for me and the listeners. How did you find the
Yeah.
experience, Mosh?
Yeah. It was great. Thank you so much. And it was very interesting hearing about your journey. Um, and I think it seems like you're building an ecosystem around this podcast, which is good. And um, just it's good for people to know that everything's possible if you're ready, determined, and put your mind to it. And um, I'm very pro education and being part of the community, like the global tech ecosystem. And this is one of the ways that more people will join. So kudos to you. Really, it's good. I know it's a hard thing to get something off the ground, and I think you're doing a great job.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah,
Uh,
because I've started a bunch of projects over the years. I've been starting projects since about 17, 18, when the App Store first came out, and just doing all sorts of stuff. And the podcast is the latest one. Yeah, it's just my way of connecting with people, instead of just sending a LinkedIn invite and saying let's connect. And I'm like, okay, there's something that we can talk about your journey, your experiences, and go from there. And it's crazy the sort of people I've spoken to over the last year, and the connections I made just as a result of talking. That's another thing I all just add to what we was talking about in terms of getting a job, or in terms of doing something, is just ask. Because the amount of times that I've got something, or able to talk to somebody, just because I was willing to ask, but then with that, be willing to accept a bit of rejection, failure, because a lot of people will either ignore or say no. But if you ask, if you don't ask, you don't get. It's as
yeah,
simple as that. And I
totally.
remember when I started the podcast, the first 4 to 5 episodes or so were people I knew, and then but obviously that was exhausting, people I knew and that were willing to come on. And I was like, let me just message people on LinkedIn that look interesting, that have an interesting job or role, or some sort of journey that they can talk about. Let me just message them. And that's how a lot of it just began, just messaging people. And it's surprising how many people, for no payment, for no real benefit almost to themselves, are willing to take 2 or so hours, or 2 plus hours out of their day, to come onto a podcast with me, talk about stuff. and just discuss their overall experiences. But again, it's that thing. If I had just tried to get people that I knew and was willing to do it instead of asking people, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't be on episode 24, 5, or, whatever this is,
Wow.
right now. So it is literally just that thing. Be willing to ask, be willing to have a go. And worst case, somebody says no and you fail a bit. At the end of the day, it's not like somebody's got a gun to your head and says, if you don't get this person on the podcast, I'm pulling the trigger. It's the actual downside of it is so minimal of most decisions in life. It, it's worth trying it, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also when you try to help people, then the world helps you. That's what I think. But
Yeah, for sure. Like I mean, you just get opportunities. It's like I was saying with this podcast. When I've spoken to people, as a result of the podcast, I'm doing some work with some people now, and that work, if I had just messaged them and I said, I want to do some work with you, they would have just ignored it. Because I get cold, emails all the time on LinkedIn, and messages on LinkedIn, or cold emails all the time, and I ignore them. But when I get an email or a message from someone that has connected with me from some other previous, project or whatever it is, even if it didn't make money initially or there was no money involved, then I'm like, okay, I already know this person, so I know there's some legitimacy to that individual. I've spoken to them, and three, I mean, two, I- I'll hear them out. See what they have to say. So yeah, just doing that, and the more it, it's like doors. The more doors you knock on in life, the more potential doors that will open. You can't expect a door to
100%.
open for you if you're, stood down the road from it and you haven't knocked on it. You've got to be willing to walk up to it, knock on it. Somebody might ignore you. You go on to the next one, and that's just a fact of life.
100%. So
So
true.
100%. So yeah, thank you for jumping on the podcast. If
Thank
you
you.
enjoyed this week's, episode, just give it a like or follow on your platform, Spotify, Google Podcast, etc. And I'll see you in next week's episode. Thank you, Mosh, and take care.
Thank you, Farhan. Thanks.
Bye.